welcome to the Fire It Up with CJ show. We are in part two in our conversation with Carol Hughes about her book, Home Will Never Be the Same Again, a guide for adult children of gray divorce. Carol is a marriage and family therapist who has worked with divorcing families as a therapist, child and co-parenting specialist, divorce coach, and mediator. So welcome back.
Thanks, CJ, for having me.
So I want to talk about how you get over the regret. So as we said in the first segment, there's always, someone is leaving someone, someone's surprised, and someone's like, "I'm ready to go," and the other one's like, "Please stay." Is that, I assume that is that pretty typical?
It's more typical than mutually decided.
Okay.
Definitely more typical, for sure.
Okay. So what are some of the gray divorce regrets that people have?
Um, well, it depends on the stage that the parents are in. You're talking about the parents now, right?
Yep.
Right. So a lot of times one or both has a regret that they didn't divorce sooner,
Hmm.
because of what I was talking about in the previous segment, where they've created this uh, image of their family that is important to them and their children that really wasn't real. And children get their identity, and so do parents, from how other people see them in the
Mm-hmm.
community. And so then they have this fantasy that maybe, excuse me, if we divorced sooner, it would have been less damaging. But we also know from the research with younger children that that isn't true either. It's always difficult on children when parents divorce. Uh, Another huge regret that some parents have, not all, some they should, I think, is that they have not been honest in the marriage,
Mm-hmm.
and they've, had an affair or affairs as a way to, quote, be happy, or to bridge their way out of the marriage. And when the adult children find this out, which invariably does come out at some point, usually they're furious with that parent. Not always. Some can see that they just side with the parent. And then if I'd only known a better way to do this, if I'd talked to someone like a therapist who could have encouraged me how to handle this better. But once that bell has been rung, you can't unring that bell. That's another very common one. Sometimes people look back, these parents, and say, even walking down the aisle, I just didn't think this was the right person,
Mm.
right marriage, but I stayed for the kids. And then when their adult children are struggling, upset with them, angry, depressed, all kinds of anxiety, they're having trouble with their own marriages, with work, then they're like, well, I should have trusted my gut on that. I mean, it's easy for us to
Mm.
second guess ourselves, right?
Right, I made these sacrifices and now look. Oh
Mm-hmm.
gosh.
Right.
Wow. Okay. Um, and what are some of the in the book you talk about boundary issues? Is are there certain boundary issue? What are the boundary issues that come up once a parent divorces? I can think of all sorts of things based on the scenarios that you just mentioned, but
Uh-huh.
maybe you can share with me some of the boundary issues.
Sure. Sure. So we have a chapter about boundaries for the adult children. And throughout the book, we encourage the parents to read this book too, because they can learn a lot about how to handle things better. And then a chapter specifically for the parents. So I'm going to kind of touch on both of those. So, number one, the adult children need to realize that it's okay to set boundaries. If your parent is trying to use you as his or her confidant, therapist, best friend, we've heard stories, and some of the research says too, the parents are so excited to be free of the marriage. They invite their adult child to go out, dancing with them, to go to bars, I
Oh
mean,
gosh.
or tell me about how I was kind of been married for so long, I don't know that much about sex. I mean, do not do this to your adult children. And adult children need to know that it's okay to say, you know what, I'm not comfortable at all talking about these things. I don't want to hear about your sexual issues. I don't want to hear you bad mouthing my mom or dad, because I love that parent still, if they do. And I want the freedom to have whatever relationship I want with each of you. So it's okay to set those boundaries. And then parents need to know that your adult child, even though he or she's an adult, is not your best friend, is not your confidant, is not your therapist, your clergy person. Take those issues to a professional, a clergy person, your friends, someone, but give your children the permission to love both of you. The other common issue that is boundaries, you can see both ways, is the parents try to align with the adult child against the other parent. Like that person's the bad parent, I'm the good parent, which
Mm,
again creates loyalty issues for adult children, just like as minor children feel adult
right.
issues.
Yeah, because from a child perspective, it's like, I just want to love both of you. So, I have a client who is thinking about separating or getting divorced. They have two older children, so exactly like you're describing. And they were never really happy in their marriage. There's a whole set of stories with why, very valid reasons, cheating, all sorts of different types of things that they never told the children. And one of the parents are like, please, I don't want you to tell the children. And yet the other one's like, I want to get a divorce because it's never really felt right for me. And then, like you said, right from the start, didn't feel right, but I just kept on going. Now the children are surprised, and the person that I'm coaching doesn't want to tell their children. The real reason is because of this cheating scenario. So how does one manage this? Because you don't want your children, not to have to bear the burden of what has ever happened in your marriage. But but they're also shocked and surprised. How
Mhm.
would you handle this
Mhm.
scenario?
That's a very good question, and it comes up a lot, CJ. And I want to say that I don't know for sure if our field is split 50-50 on how to handle this,
Hmm.
but I've definitely read different viewpoints of this. So I'm going to say that, and then I'm going to tell you how we handle it
Okay.
with the parents. So just because kids, minor or adult, ask a question doesn't mean that we should be 100% truthful if it's not appropriate for them. Now, with younger children, it's an age, appropriateness, but with older children, it's what you were just saying. Should we burden our adult children with the issues that were in our marriage? Those are marital issues. They aren't parent issues. Now, some people would say, well, you're not a good parent if you've had affairs. That's a value judgment, but the parent child relationship continues. The marital relationship is ending. So, what we tell these parents to tell the children is number one, the person who had the affairs, it's that person's job or not to tell the adult children, period. It's not the person that was affaired upon. And you can handle it, and this is still being honest. Wow, they're shocked. The children are shocked. We had adult problems in our marriage that we weren't able to solve. We tried to, if that was true. We worked with a therapist, but we weren't able to. And so we're going our separate ways. Not that we don't love each other anymore, because then often adult children, just like minor children, think, well, gosh, I guess you could stop loving me too. And they may ask the same question 3 or 4 times, just like younger children, because they want to hear a different answer. But this isn't about the adult children, it's about the marital relationship.
Okay, so you said there are two different ways. Is that one way, or is there two ways
But
embedded
the
in that?
other way is some people in our field think that brutal honesty is the best policy, and no secrets kind of thing. But that ignores the different generational strata in the marriage, in the family. The parent-child relationship should be protected and helped. These children still deserve to have a good relationship with both parents. Does it eventually come out? Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. The kids always have, some had a gut feeling that might have been an issue. Um, but otherwise, it creates, oh, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. We write about this in the book. my wife deserves a better husband than I am. I haven't had affairs, but my dad or my mom did. Apple doesn't fall far from the tree. These things happen, and adult children start to question themselves as well. And they're carrying the burden of their parents not having good enough boundaries to keep the marital issues separate from the parent child issues.
Right. So it's all about boundaries again. Like, so it's what information you share or don't share, um, and how you I think it's very hard because as a parent, you want to make sure that your relationship is still secure with the child, even though you're splitting up.
Right.
And there may be always like one child who's more like leaning towards one parent or the other, and then you're kind of worried, like, well, what about me? What if they like, and so the other thing that you mentioned in the book is remarriage. So what happens if they get married to someone and so I have a friend who said, you know what, I feel like the kids like the stepmom better than me. And I'm like, their birth mom. Like it has this kind of feeling to it. I'm sure there's all sorts of other scenarios. How do you deal with the remarriage part and the insecurities that you have with that?
Right. And it's that parent that's feeling insecure. It's that parent's issue to work through. Minor children and adult children will say, doesn't my parent get it? It's okay for me to have people in my life that I like and I'm comfortable with. That insecurity is about that parent's insecurity, likely. And
Right,
so they need to work on that. And younger children will say, I have enough love for everybody. Younger
right,
children will. Older
right.
children are a little more discerning about what they say.
Right. So
So
so the boundary that I'm hearing that's very clear from your perspective is like this is do not burden your children with your issues because this is
yeah,
not their issue whether you're feeling insecure like so like I feel like you like your new stepmom better than me. That's that's not a conversation to have.
no, well, I mean, they could have it, but the adult child can't fix it. The parent
Ah,
has to fix it inside of that person. You know,
okay.
I mean, will it make the adult child feel guilty? Probably. But then that's the adult child has to work through that. That's a boundary issue. If we take guilt on that is not ours, that's a boundary issue too within our own selves. Just
So
because someone's giving a guilt trip doesn't mean we have to accept it, right?
yeah, so in the instance of protecting your spouse who's like, I don't really think, our children need to know that you cheated. Don't put that burden on them. So that was very clear languaging. In this particular instance, like you're a little bit hard about relating to the remarriage or the other person or insecure about the relationships. What's the best way to handle that? Like what would be the languaging that you would expect someone to either parent or child to initiate so that conversation could be commenced?
I'll tell you. For the parent, if the parent were my client, I would tell the parent, okay, first of all, I think you need to work on your own insecurity issues here about whatever that's about. But if you insist on talking with your adult child about it and you're my client, I would say, tell your adult child that you realize that you're feeling some insecurity about how well they get along with the new step parent. But it's not your job to fix, adult child. I'm going to work on it and I'm sure I'll get through it. Maybe sometime if my therapist thinks it would be helpful for you to join me to talk about this, would you be willing to do that? And the adult child says yes or no, which is their right to say. So, but that's about as clear as I can say it.
Yeah.
It's really not the adult child's issue.
Right. Yeah.
It's the
Don't
parent.
burden the adult regardless of what it may be about your spouse, about your remarriage, all of that stuff.
Right.
Now, how about when the children, so wait, let me, this whole idea of, so I'm kind of tracing back the steps of what you said children feel is that they're a little bit shocked and from like was this whole thing a sham? And so here's like some person who just found out that their spouse wants to leave and it's a surprise for them, and they're also feeling that I'm wondering if this was a sham. Your
Mhm.
children are feeling like this is a sham. This may have been a sham or like an illusion or delusion or whatever. What what do you say to your kids who are like, I just don't understand? And you're suffering the same thing. You're both going
Mhm.
through shock, disorientation, and a surreal feeling. How do you protect and support the children while you're still feeling those same kind of things?
Right. That's a very good question. And we say once a parent, always a parent. And it's even in that situation, which is really difficult, which is why the parents need their own help, usually, clergy, therapists, whomever, not their children, but to validate what their children are saying. The boundary is this isn't about me right now as a parent. It's about what my adult child is telling me they're feeling. And so now I'm the parent talking to that adult child. I can imagine how much of a shock this is to you. I'm sure it does feel surreal, and if I could make this go away, I would, but it's happening. Something like that would be a good opener to validate what the children are feeling rather than what so many parents do because they haven't gotten their own help is, I know, I feel the same way. I was shocked too. Poor me. Support me, help me. I mean, it's one thing if the parent's 75 and frail or ill to support that parent in their frailty, but adult children are not their parents' confidants and they aren't their therapists. That's
Right.
a really important boundary.
It means so much to me that you're listening to the show. Would love your support in any way by giving me comments below or to subscribe to the show or share the show with friends. Thank you again for your support. Love and blessings.